Hello, everybody, and we are breaking the bias. Break the bias. Rompiendo prejuicios. Este es el mudras, lo que diríamos en las culturas orientales y de la India, mudra, el gesto, que nos lleva a celebrar la globalidad y celebrar la diversidad. Inclusión, participación, no solamente de género, sino en todos los aspectos de la vida. Nuestra invitada número 167 de los 30 minutos promoviendo la unidad en la diversidad es Karla Almendarez-Ramos. Ella es hondureña y reside en los Estados Unidos. We are so happy that she has accepted the invitation to come today and talk to us about her life, her journey, her aspirations and inspirations for the 2022, and also to take us back to the past, how everything started. So, hola Karla, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Wani. Nos vamos a retornar en el tiempo, veo yo, muy pronto. Así es que me alistaré. Un gusto de estar aquí. Gracias por la invitación.
Gracias, Karla. Pues te cuento que esta serie de 30 minutos de Moving Cultures, que es la propuesta que manejo, es realmente una cápsula en el tiempo, como tú dices, porque nos da la oportunidad de retomar momentos y experiencias del pasado que son las que han sido el fundamento para lo que hacemos en la actualidad. Cuéntanos, ¿quién es Karla Almendarez-Ramos?
Ok, la pregunta del millón. Yo creo que por ahora, en esta etapa de mi vida, pues soy una mujer profesional, ante todo inmigrante en este país estadounidense, hondureña. Soy madre, esposa, hija, y también soy pues representante de la comunidad inmigrante hispana, latina en este país, con una responsabilidad muy grande y privilegio por educación y por pues ubicación profesional y trabajo, de ser una voz de la comunidad que a veces no tiene oportunidades ni espacios de hablar por sí misma la comunidad. Entonces, creo que por ahora en eso lo dejamos, porque en otras épocas ha sido otra persona, pero creo que ese es mi enfoque por ahora.
Karla, it's wonderful, to hear how evolution, and when we say evolution, is not about transformation, it's about complementary experiences that are practically framing the person you are today. You were telling us that you're a mother, you are a sister, you are a community development and service leader, and you have been the voice of the voiceless people in your city in the United States. Tell us a little bit about that experience living in Virginia, right? And working with the non-privileged communities that usually are very well equipped and with a lot of capacities, but they don't have the learning and the language skills. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this position I have now is, I think, it's just a result of a process of learning and looking for a job once I was here. Definitely when I got to Virginia in the United States, I realized that I needed to learn the language at a professional level in order to go back to the level I used to work in Honduras, So being a professional over there, I wanted to continue my career. So I decided to study here in a college, and that allowed me to get a profession here and get a job in actually was by accident. I just applied to several jobs, and I was hired at a state agency, a government agency that work with emergency disasters and prevention for disasters. And I ended up being the only Hispanic person in the entire agency. And I realized the void of information to specifically the Hispanic community, the Spanish-speaking community, in the preparedness for disasters, for emergency notifications, understanding the different disasters that the weather brought us here. They were totally different than in our countries. So I decided I was there, and I had to act, and I had to advocate for the information and the access to information in our language. And that's how my government or public service career started.
Karla, you mentioned something very important. Success is always related to opportunity and knowledge. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people tend to believe there is luck or chance, but I definitely believe there is opportunity and knowledge. You have the skills, you have the capacity, and the opportunity was that you were the only Hispanic person in the circle. And the next opportunity was that you understood that you had a mission. Let's talk about the mission. Why is that so important in your life?
I think education is power, knowledge is power. And it not necessarily means you have to go to college. We have such a wealth of knowledge from our cultures, from our generations passed down into us, but that information applied in our countries, and most of the things that or information we need to be successful here, to have a good quality of life, is different, because we have decided to live in a different culture, in a different country, and different rules guide this community. So information, education for me is the key, not to forget our values and culture, because that just enrich who we are, but also build upon them, so we can be able to navigate the community and have access to services and well-informed.
You're also mentioning something that is key, that is the belief systems. The belief systems bring us to so many different positions in our mindset, in our physical space, and also in the future activities that we like to engage. You work with the Hispanic community, and I guess that as Hispanics are also a fusion of so many different cultures, you end up not only working with Hispanics, but with many other cultures. Let's talk about multicultural approach in your work.
Well, I think not just me educating our community has been a privilege, and I take it as a responsibility, but also my work, my experience in public service has led me to learn and about a lot of things, about diversity, about the privilege I had in not just here in this country, but in Honduras, of being a light skin, of being tall, and not fitting the stereotype of typical Latina women. So I have been able to acknowledge my privilege and also use it to educate others. We in my office, we serve the multicultural communities that are immigrants in the region. And so we work with the African community, we work with the Asian community, and of course the Hispanic community, which is very rich also. We have communities from different parts of Latin America, from Mexico all the way to Patagonia. So that's how we say it. And then, so we have, we're learning, here people has to learn that we don't all eat tacos, for example.
Ujú.
There are certain countries in South America that they never eat in a taco because it's not part of their cuisine
Ujú.
and their diets. As we don't all eat spicy food, and we don't have the same dialects. And also we have a rich indigenous community as well as African descendant community. We are a mestizo race. I always say that word because it's for me, it's the truth. We cannot, even though we some look a little bit lighter in the skin, but our essence is mestizo because we are a mixed race.
Y es así como mencionas, el tema de la multiculturalidad no solamente se refleja en la apariencia física, sino en las tradiciones, en las costumbres, diferentes manifestaciones verbales, no verbales, porque también los gestos cambian desde México hasta, como mencionabas tú, a la Tierra del Fuego. Karla, cuéntanos un poquito de la situación de las mujeres emigrantes vamos a hablar en el estado de Virginia.
Bueno, en general, yo trabajo para la municipalidad de la capital de Virginia, que es Richmond. En este caso, el conocimiento que tengo de la situación podría ser solo de forma local, regional. Esta pandemia, por ejemplo, ha venido a afectar de manera pues muy elevada a lo que es la mujer en sí, específicamente latina, porque ha permitido a abusadores, a parejas, a pues abusar y tener ese abuso ser no reportado, porque pues en la pandemia se tuvo muchos meses de aislamiento y no había forma, no había trabajo, no había oportunidades de salir de la casa, y eso permitió un incremento del abuso muy marcado. Y desgraciadamente, no solamente en la mujer, pero también incluso en ciertos hombres, niños, adolescentes, y hay abuso de violencia doméstica o de género en todo nivel. Entonces sí ha sido una crisis que afortunadamente hay organizaciones locales que se dedican a crear conciencia, a hacer grupos de apoyo, a educar, a ofrecer servicios de consejería, y pues la misión es de pues compartir esos recursos con la comunidad y que hayan espacios donde las personas se sientan seguras de poder buscar ayuda.
Has mencionado un tema que va muy de cerca con la campaña que estamos en el momento promoviendo, donde cruzamos los brazos. Y este cruzar de brazos es bien interesante, Karla, porque no solamente es decir no a los estereotipos y decir no a los prejuicios, a la discriminación, a todo tipo de negatividad que nos rodea y que no nos permite crecer como comunidad, sino que también es una manera de abrazarnos y reconocer el poder que tenemos, ¿verdad? Y la fuerza con la que contamos para poder implementar cambios contundentes de manera global. Cuando hablabas de la violencia que se presentó durante la crisis de salud, que por el momento ya es ahora una endemia,
Sí.
Los problemas relacionados con la salud mental y el tema de las masculinidades tóxicas, creo que son temas recurrentes. ¿Qué nos puedes contar sobre esto?
Bueno, quería antes reflejar un poco de que la pandemia no solamente es una situación de salud, pero los efectos socioeconómicos han permitido otras crisis florecer, como la violencia doméstica, la violencia de género. ¿Por qué? Porque normalmente las mujeres son las cuidadoras de los niños y al no tener trabajos, al no haber escuela, al perder trabajos esenciales, se vieron obligadas a quedarse en casa y depender de una persona que posiblemente era un abusador, y se vieron imposibilitados de tener recursos propios. Entonces, al perder control económico, pues llegan a depender de una persona, un abusador. Y estamos hablando que pues la mayoría de nuestros clientes en nuestra oficina son inmigrantes indocumentados, y existe una vulnerabilidad mayor al no tener pues documentos aquí, no tener seguro médico y muchos aspectos que son prohibitivos al no tener estos documentos. Pero con lo que se refiere a la violencia, creo yo, es una labor comunitaria el crear conciencia, porque nosotros somos una cultura, la comunidad hispana somos una cultura comunitaria en la que la mayoría de las veces lo vemos, compartimos información de boca en boca, ¿verdad? Y confiamos más en una persona, un vecino, una amistad que nos refiere a una organización, que confiamos más en estas personas que tal vez en unos noticieros o fuentes oficiales de información. ¿Por qué? Porque ya hemos establecido esa red de apoyo con amistades, con iglesias, y entonces a veces es difícil quebrar esas barreras de desinformación. En las que a veces hay grupos muy cerrados donde pues hay que abrir un poco la oportunidad de que entre información nueva, información de nuevos recursos, y quebrar esos círculos viciosos.
Karla, you just mentioned also a key situation that is related to the non-official information that is disseminated in the different circles in the community. What about the creation of non-official groups of the internal people of the community who works hand by hand with the government institutions to actually socialize information that is more accurate, that is more legally supported, and that can help you break, like you say, break those stereotypes?
Yes, a lot of great things happened during the pandemic too, and I see the positive effects. It forced us to work together more with the government, with private organizations and nonprofit organizations in the community, because there were so many things unknown when this crisis started, that it was a lot of reactive measures being taken rather than proactive, and nothing was written to respond to this crisis. So one of the partnerships and work groups that started during this pandemic was a group of a network of health providers, local small clinics that provide health service to the undocumented and uninsured, together with the health district and organizations, nonprofits, health promoters or promotores de salud, our local government offices, not just my office, but the surrounding counties. So that group not just gathered to vet information, but also find creative ways to distribute the information through trusted sources, once the information was vetted by medical professionals, we just took that information and shared it through community groups, churches, local radio stations in Spanish, even Spanish groups in Facebook. It's just like that word of mouth process. It usually, it takes a lot more time, but that's what I think it's effective, because it goes through different levels in the community.
Cultural impact is a very powerful tool, because it comes and drives from generation to generation to generation. And like you mentioned, it's a very difficult to let people take a turn, because it's a lot of fear in the background. What can you tell us about these men and women who are illegal immigrants? They also come with some stereotypes and stigmas in their mind about how to adjust to a culture that is unknown for them, that they only know for the telenovelas probably, or for the TV programs they see, or the music they heard, and they don't have really skills and preparation that is realistic. How do you see that situation, Karla?
Well, first of all, we don't use the word illegal. We say undocumented. And in reality, I think every person has a talent and a skill. I think the most important part when somebody comes to this country, and just to understand their desire to have an opportunity to provide a better life to their children. That's primarily the goal of almost every single person that migrates to a place out of their native country in looking for a better life, is to provide a better life for their children and their families. They come, usually they arrive to places where they either have family members already established there, friends who receive them. And unfortunately, their close communities do not allow them to vent into the general culture of this country, because they are building a support group within their own language and their own culture to survive. So it's very difficult to criticize that, because otherwise we will be lost for a while without that support system. So we actually teach a cultural awareness class to our city employees, and just one of the sections we discussed is to people sometimes when talk to an immigrant who have been many years in this country, they haven't learned to speak English. They said, well, why don't they just speak English? Why they don't just learn English? But the true and the reality is that when they arrive, they build that support system within their friends who speak Spanish, their church who speak Spanish. They can only work at a place that allows them to speak Spanish because they haven't learned the language. So it just become a very close little bubble. But they learn to navigate, and they learn to function in that space to be safe. To be safe and to be able to work and provide for their family. So unfortunately, because of working conditions, many of the immigrants, they had to work more than one job to make ends meet. So we're talking about people who work 2 jobs and they have limited transportation. and when is the time they're going to use to learn English, to go to classes. So there's nobody supporting them economically for them to take the time and take some classes, like for example, happens in European countries when immigrants arrive. They get a subsidy while they have a time to go and learn the culture, the language of that country. And that's not the case here. So I think it's a lot of how the system is established. There's not an opportunity for the immigrants that are newly arrived here to dedicate the time and learn the language, because they have to live the life. They had to care, provide for children, provide for families, pay the rent, pay the bills, and work.
Karla, when you talk about, we're talking about cultural competence practically. You know, there is understanding all the facts that are not necessarily obvious for the society who is receiving these undocumented immigrants. Yeah, and thank you for the correction. Yeah, because like you say, even in the media, it's still a lot of use of the non-proper language, you know, in
Yes.
this situation. So let's talk about that part of the society that not necessarily is undocumented, but has been also forced to move to the United States, to Virginia, let's say, without having the language skills. Because that's another story, you know, like
Yes.
you can come from a middle class or privileged status, but you don't have the skills. You don't have the language skills. You might have the titles. What's the situation there? Because you mentioned it at the beginning, and I think this is the way we're gonna get close to the end of our conversation. How can a person do better adjusting when they don't have the language skills?
I usually use my experience to guide people who sometimes come and ask for guidance when are recently arrived in this area. A person, for example, we're seeing an influx of people from Venezuela, specifically, and just using that country as an example. They are usually come here with college degrees, bachelor's, master's degree, PhDs, people who may have a different status position in their countries, and now they're here. They are probably available or able to have some documents because of the way they enter the country. And so not having the language skills also is a challenge for them. What I usually do is I have a very heart-to-heart conversation with them. And when they ask, well, I'm looking for a job, and like, what do you do? What are your skills? You know, just a brief conversation. And I said, well, the reality is you're gonna have to find a job that allows you to get some basic income cover, and then also you need to study. That is the only way. You need to get into a community college or a university and sign up for an ESL program. If you want to work in your profession as an accountant, as a dentist, as a psychologist or engineer, these type of professions, you will need that level of English proficiency. So you need to go to college. And that it's not going to be overnight. It took me, honestly, 10 years to be, I think, bilingual, to feel that I didn't have to translate in my mind from English to Spanish. And I had to go to college for 4 years, but it was worth it. I always tell them it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very hard. I remember it was taking me 3 days to write 1,000 words essays at the beginning. And then at the end, I could write them in 3 or 4 hours. So but I think it's rewarding when you do the work, because when you learn the language, it's not just opening that door for a job, but also it's opening the door for the whole culture. And it opens multiple doors for you to engage in a community, for you be an advocate, advocate for others, speak for others, teach your children that are probably going to be born here and be bicultural, how to navigate both cultures. So it's just an infinity opportunity once you learn the language. And sometimes I will say not everybody is going to be pursuing that route, but that's okay. I think we all have the right to decide the pathway we take, and it's going to be okay. If they just want to learn the basic language to relate with people at work or in the community, there are several community centers that offer ESL classes, nonprofit organizations, adult education programs, and all of them are very accessible to everybody.
Karla, thank you very much for promoting unity and diversity, for the work you do, raising awareness on multicultural living and understanding. And the last thing I'm going to ask you, and this has to be in Spanish, será dar un mensaje a la juventud con relación a la inclusión, la participación y la diversidad.
Pues me gustaría el mensaje que reciban de mí es que también nosotros debemos aprender a ser más abiertos y de aceptar otras culturas como iguales, ¿verdad? Así como nosotros merecemos el respeto y el espacio para mantener nuestra cultura, nuestra identidad y vivir en armonía, así nosotros debemos el mismo respeto a otras culturas, a otras razas. Y muchas veces que pienso yo que debemos usar esa información para hacer un análisis de cómo nuestra comunidad también debe crecer y ser más inclusiva y más abierta y tolerante, ya que pues merecemos todos, ya sea no solamente hablando de género, de razas, pero también a nivel general, generacional. Creo que debemos ser un poco más abiertos como cultura hispana y aceptar a las personas como son, porque todos podemos aprender mutuamente de otras culturas.
Gracias, Karla, y cruzamos los brazos para decir no a los estereotipos y a los prejuicios y a cualquier tipo de negatividad a nuestro alrededor. Gracias por promover la unidad en la diversidad nuevamente. Te saludo y te envío muchos besitos, Karla, y hasta la próxima.
Gracias,
Chao.
Juan, y un abrazo a todos. Chao.
Chao.